starting at verse 1. Some time after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing those who were ill. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself.
And now reading from verse 25. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "Very truly I tell you, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval." Then they asked him, "What must we do to do the works God requires?" Jesus answered, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent." So they asked him, "What sign then will you give, that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they said, "always give us this bread." Then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. But as I told you, you have seen me, and still you do not believe. All those the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of all those he has given me, but raise them up at the last day. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you very much. Well, we're going to be looking at the whole of John chapter 6 together. Let me start by reading verse 35 again that Robin's just read for us. Verse 35. Then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Many of you will know that one of my jobs here at St. Ebbe's is to work alongside students and young people, and I've been doing some particular thinking about that this week. I try every week, actually, to think about my job, but this coming week we're talking to a few people who are about to go into ministry about what ministry amongst students is like. And obviously the answer to that is that it's wonderful and it's the best job in the world. But I was kind of looking, okay, how can I helpfully convey stuff to these people? And I came across some stats that tell me that people in the kind of student age bracket, people aged 18 to 24, are, on the whole, strikingly dissatisfied with life. So a joint survey by Warwick and Edinburgh universities asked, I can't remember how many young people, but those they asked how often they feel cheerful. 25% of 18 to 24-year-olds responded rarely or never. Have you been feeling good about yourself? 31%, rarely or never. Have you been feeling relaxed? 45%, rarely or never. Have you had energy to spare? 55%, rarely or never. And that's some stats for 18 to 24-year-olds, but how about everybody else? Satisfied? Fulfilled? Or is it the case that when you stand back and think about your life, you think, is that it? Lots of us will feel that we haven't achieved as much as we should have done. Or even more depressingly, sometimes we achieve exactly what we set out to achieve, and it turns out to be kind of average. For lots of us here, we got into Oxford, and now we feel like imposters. Or in all sorts of things. We enjoy the good stuff for a while, the relationship, the job, the money, but it's only a kind of heartbeat until we start worrying about, what if I lose it? Or what if there's some better job or some better relationship that would make me feel more fulfilled or more satisfied? We're having that talk on C.S. Lewis on Tuesday evening, and I thought I'd give you a little taster of some of what C.S. Lewis has to say on this subject. Let me read a quote from him. It's a longish one, but he says, "Most people, if they really learn to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want, and want acutely, something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or first think of some foreign country, or first take up some subject that excites us, are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. I'm not speaking of what would ordinarily be called unsuccessful marriages or trips and so on. I'm speaking of the best possible ones. There is always something we grasped at in that first moment of longing that just fades away in the reality. The spouse may be a good spouse. The scenery has been excellent. It has turned out to be a good job, but it has evaded us." I think I know what he means. Do you? In fact, it's in the Bible, actually. Don't worry about turning to it. But in Ecclesiastes, the author of Ecclesiastes says that he undertook great projects. He built houses for himself and planted vineyards, and he amassed silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces and all the delights of a man's heart. And what he found was that, in his words, it's like chasing after the wind. So what do you do when you can't find it? Actually, I came across that C.S. Lewis quote in a book by a Christian author called Tim Keller called Making Sense of God. It's a brilliant book. And he says, when people can't find it, they can't find the thing, there's basically two different approaches they take. Either they say satisfaction is out there somewhere. And maybe the problem is kind of Michael Bublé style, I just haven't met you yet. Or maybe the problem is that there's a person or there's a system holding me back, stopping me from getting the thing. Or maybe I just need to work harder. Or maybe I'm just failing and I'll never find it. Or, alternatively, people say, satisfaction, it's not out there. Just give up trying. You'll never find it. Be cynical. What do we do about the fact that satisfaction and fulfillment are really, really hard to get hold of? Well, let me read verse 35 again. Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Jesus is claiming, isn't he, to be able to deal with the hunger that just gnaws away on the inside of everybody. It's quite a claim, and one worth listening to, but it comes with a health warning. The health warning is that Jesus is not the kind of self-help guru who is going to give you some tips that are basically unobjectionable. They might not help, but they're not going to do any harm. It's interesting, at the start of this chapter, in verse 2 of John 6, the start of the chapter, there is a great crowd following Jesus. And then back over in verse 24, they are still willing to sail across a lake to hear what he's got to say. But then by verse 67, not only have the crowd all left, but Jesus is forced to ask his 12 remaining followers whether they would like to leave as well. Jesus was very popular, and then he started talking about this stuff, and almost nobody wanted to hear it. So I guess there may be some of us who find that this evening, but there may be some of us who hear Jesus' claims here and what backs them up and find satisfaction that lasts for eternity. Two things Jesus is going to teach us about the things that we are hungry for. Number one, Jesus can give you what you're hungry for. Jesus can give you what you're hungry for. And we're looking here at the first 24 verses. So it's these two famous stories, Jesus feeding 5,000 and then walking on the water. And I think they're probably two of the more better known stories in Jesus' life, aren't they? If you're at all familiar with the Gospels, you may well have come across them. We'll zoom in on verse 5. And as we say, Jesus, he's attracted a huge following by now. And from a mountainside, he sees crowds coming, and he asks the question, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? Philip, who is a local, we think, of the area, says effectively, you've got to be joking. You would need half a year's wages to feed this lot. And they find out that basically nobody has thought to bring any food with them except for one boy's packed lunch. And he's got 5 loaves, 2 fish, and lots will know what happens next. Jesus miraculously makes it stretch, not just to the extent that everybody gets some, but to the extent that they fill 12 baskets with leftovers at the end of the story. So they end up with way more than they started with, having fed 5,000 people. Now, I think it's just worth us pausing to feel the force of it, and so I have here a prop. So 5,000 people were fed on this day, or that is 5,000, just counting the men, so 5,000 families, almost certainly more than 5,000.